Suggestions for teaching. Teaching problem-solving techniques. Teach students how to identify problems. Because the notion of finding problems is likely to strike students as an unusual activity, you may want to introduce this skill in gradual steps. One way to start is to have students list different ways in which problems can be identified. Typical responses are to scan newspaper and magazine articles, observe customer and employee behavior in a store, watch traffic patterns in a local area, and interview local residents, including, for instance, teachers, business owners, police, clergy, or government officials. The next step is to have students carry out these suggested activities to gain an understanding of the status quo and find out how people identify problems. They may learn, for example, that a principal periodically has lunch with a teacher to learn of conditions that decrease the teacher's effectiveness. Teach students how to represent problems. Problem representation involves transforming the words that express a problem into an internal representation of those words. To do this, students must understand the concepts embedded in the problem statement and the relationships among these concepts. Consequently, the ability to construct a good representation of a problem is based on a command of the subject matter surrounding the problem and familiarity with the particular type of problem. As the work of Jerome Bruner and David Ausubel indicates, students need to acquire a genuine understanding of many of the associations, discriminations, concepts, and rules of a discipline before they can effectively solve problems in that subject matter area. Too often, students are taught to state principles on cue, but they reveal by further responses that they do not understand what they are saying. The recommendations we make in this book about presenting information in an organized fashion and in meaningful contexts will go a long way toward helping students understand the subject matter on which problems are based. The classic illustration of what can occur when information is not learned meaningfully was given over a century ago by William James in his Talks to Teachers. A friend of mine visiting a school was asked to examine a young class in geography. Glancing at the book, she said, "Suppose you should dig a hole in the ground, hundreds of feet deep. How should you find it at the bottom, warmer or cooler than on top?" None of the class replying, the teacher said, "I'm sure they know, but I think you don't ask the question quite rightly. Let me try." So, taking the book, she asked, "In what condition is the interior of the globe?" and received an immediate answer from half the class at once. The interior of the globe is in a condition of igneous fusion. Igneous fusion. If these students had genuinely understood concepts and principles regarding the composition of the Earth, such as the relationship between igneous fusion and heat, instead of having simply memorized meaningless phrases, they would have been able to answer the original question. Once you are satisfied that students meaningfully understand the elements of a problem, you can demonstrate methods to represent those elements and how they interrelate. One frequent recommendation is to use visual forms of problem representation, concept maps, Venn diagrams, flowcharts, and drawings, for example. Visual representations of ideas foster comprehension because of their concreteness. The following two examples illustrate how a Venn diagram, a set of intersecting circles, and a flow diagram can represent a particular type of problem. The government wants to contact all druggists, all gun store owners, and all parents in a town without contacting anyone twice. Based on the following statistics, how many people must be contacted? 10 druggists, 5 gun store owners, 3,000 parents, druggists who own gun stores, druggists who are parents, gun store owners who are parents. I've been to druggists who have gun stores in McKayville. Solution using Venn diagram. You can see there's overlapping elements, but you're still going to have to contact mostly 3,000 people. As the Venn diagram illustrates, the total number of people who must be contacted is 3,005 people. Example, Sally loaned $7 to Betty, but Sally borrowed $15 from Estella and $32 from Joan. Moreover, Joan owes $3 to Estella and $7 to Betty. One day, the women get together at Betty's house to straighten out their accounts. Which woman left with $18 more than she came with? Well, here's a flow chart that shows the relationships. It looks like verbal reasoning problems that describe transactions can take the form of a flow diagram, as shown here. From the diagram, it is clear that Estella left with $18 more than she came with, even though Joan left with more overall, I think. Yes. Teach students how to compile relevant information. Good problem solvers start with themselves when compiling information to solve a problem or evidence to support a position on an issue. They recognize the importance of recalling earlier learned information, metacognitive knowledge, and are adept at doing so, cognitive skill. Poor problem solvers, by contrast, lack metacognitive knowledge, cognitive skills, or both. If their deficiency is metacognitive, they make little or no effort to recall solution-relevant memories, even when the information was recently learned, because they do not understand the importance of searching long-term memory for potentially useful knowledge. Even if a student poor in problem-solving recognizes the value of searching long-term memory for relevant information, he may still be handicapped because of inadequate encoding and retrieval skills. To minimize any metacognitive deficiency, make sure your instruction in problem-solving methods emphasizes the importance of retrieving and using previously learned knowledge. To minimize retrieval problems, make sure you recall and implement the suggestions for teaching section that we offered in Chapter 8. If a student does possess all the relevant information needed to work out a solution or analyze an issue, you will have to guide her toward individuals and sources that can help. In referring students to individuals, select people who are judged to be reasonably knowledgeable about the subject, are careful thinkers, and are willing to share their ideas. As an example, consider the issue of whether certain books should be banned from a school's reading list. In interviewing a knowledgeable person, students might ask questions such as the following because they allow some insight into the individual's reading process and the evidence used to support his position. What general effects do you think characters in novels who rebel against adult authority have on readers' behavior? Are certain groups of people, such as middle and high school students, likely to be influenced by the motives and actions of such characters? Why do you think so? Does a ban on a certain book violate the author's right to free speech? No. Does a book ban violate the principle of academic freedom? Somewhat. Why? Is it the proper role of a school board to prevent or discourage students from exposure to certain ideas during school hours? Yes. Yes, it is. If a reasonably informed person is not available, recognized authorities can often be interviewed by phone. If a student chooses this tactic, Ruggiero suggests calling or writing in advance for an appointment, preparing questions in advance, and asking permission to record the interview. Obviously, in addition to or in lieu of personal interviews, students can find substantial information in a good library. For example, you can steer them toward books by recognized authorities, research findings, court cases, and interviews with prominent individuals and periodicals. Although the Internet potentially contains a vast amount of information on any topic, warn students about using material gathered there indiscriminately. As with any other medium, there are more and less reliable sources, and only material from reputable sources should be gathered. One additional benefit is that an extra layer of problem-solving activity is introduced when students must decide how to gather and evaluate online information. Teach several methods for formulating problem solutions. Previously, we mentioned 7 methods for formulating a problem solution. Study worked examples, work on a similar version of the problem, break the problem into parts, work backward, use backward fading, solve an analogous problem, and create an external representation of the problem. At the end of the chapter, under Resources for Further Investigation, we recommend several recently published books on problem solving that, taken together, provide numerous examples of each method. We encourage you to check out one or more of these references and other sources as demonstrations of worked problems and as opportunities for you to practice your own problem-solving skills so that you will be well prepared to teach each of these 7 methods. Teach students the skills of evaluation. Solutions to well-structured problems are usually evaluated through the application of an estimating or checking routine. Such procedures can be found in any good mathematics text. The evaluation of solutions to ill-structured problems and analyses of issues, however, is more complex and is less frequently taught. Ruggiero discusses the following 10 habits and skills as contributing to the ability to evaluate complex solutions and positions. Being open-minded about opposing points of view. Selecting proper criteria of evaluation. Violations of this skill abound. A current example is the use of standardized achievement test scores to evaluate the quality of classroom instruction. Oh, fine. Preaching to the choir. Understanding the essence of an argument. To foster this skill, Ruggiero recommends that students be taught how to write a precis, which is a concise summary of an oral argument or reading passage. Evaluating the reliability of sources. Properly interpreting factual data. For example, recognizing that an increase in a state's income tax rate from 4 to 6% is an increase of not 2%, but of 50%. Testing the credibility of hypotheses. On the basis of existing data, hypotheses can range from highly improbable to highly probable. Making important distinctions, for instance, between preference and judgment, emotion and content, appearance and reality. Recognizing unstated assumptions, for example, that because 2 events occur close together in time, one causes the other. That when it is clear to us what is clear to us will be clear to others. That if the majority believes something, it must be true. Evaluating the validity and truthfulness of one's arguments by, for example, checking that conclusions logically follow from premises and that conclusions have not been influenced by reasoning flaws such as either or thinking, overgeneralizing, or oversimplifying. Recognizing when evidence is sufficient. All of these 10 skills can be modeled and taught in your classroom.